Welcome to Atmospheric Tales, a podcast that amplifies stories and experiences related to air pollution and climate change from around the world. I'm your host Shazad Kani, and welcome to another episode of Atmospheric Tales. Our guest today is Dr. Saad Uakkas, who is an expert in youth and organizational empowerment and engagement in climate and health. He has a public health master's from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine with Chevening Scholarship. He worked for 9 years, occupying leadership positions in global youth NGOs and networks such as the International Federation of Medical Students Associations, the World Healthcare Students Alliance, and the African Youth Initiative for Climate Change, AYICC. He has expertise in event organization, project management, organizational development, partnerships and fundraising, advocacy, and youth leadership. He's a TEDx speaker, Diana awardee, one Young World Ambassador, Gates Foundation Goalkeeper, and a global shaper. He organized 10 global campaigns and led over 30 global events and conferences, including the COP27 and COP28 Children and Youth Pavilions. He is currently the AYICC Executive Chair leading African youth climate engagement. Our interviewer today is Dr. Rosa Rantinen. She is the founder of the Safer Climate Network that brings together research, civil society, and arts. She currently works as research coordinator at the Institute for Atmospheric and Earth System Research at the University of Helsinki in Finland. She has written her doctoral thesis on the ethical desirability of human life extension at the University of Turku. Rosa has also worked in several civil society organizations, including the Finnish Red Cross, and with various interdisciplinary projects. Currently, she is specialized in working with civil society engagement and themes such as climate security, climate and death, and war and its effect on climate and the environment. Her work is part of the Atmosphere and Climate Competence Center program. Welcome to the show, Saad and Rosa.
Thank you, Shazad. Thank you for having us both here, and welcome to the show, Saad, also for me.
Thank you, Rosa, and welcome everyone.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Just a little bit of background for this discussion. Children and youth are often referred to as the leaders of tomorrow in the climate change discussion, but today we will discuss what we can do to strengthen their participation today. How can we help future generations to have a possibility for a healthy life on a healthy planet? There is a growing tendency to discuss climate change and health-related issues together. Extreme weather events such as floods and heat waves, as well as poor air quality, are major sources of mortality and health problems around the world. There exists also growing evidence on the direct and indirect mental health effects of climate change, such as increase in suicides and climate anxiety experienced by youth. To work at the intersection of these challenging issues, it's necessary to find ways to nurture our resilience as individuals, communities, and societies, and to set our action in the context of planetary health. To do this, we need to continue to find ways to listen and engage youth, to educate ourselves, and to make space for vulnerability and care at the heart of the climate change discussion. We will also discuss ways of engaging, especially African youth, in the climate change discussion and make sure that they are, to use Vanessa Nakate's words, not only at the front line, but also at the front page. So, Saad, your work with youth empowerment, climate change, and health issues is very remarkable. And in one of your talks, I heard you talking about how we need to water our community, just as a gardener would water his garden. It seems to me that you yourself have done this by providing information and care to people in the roles of a medical professional, a youth engagement expert, a climate change activist, and in many more roles. So, what would you say that motivates you personally to do this work? And this work really expands from grassroots level and clinical work to international meetings and networks. So, what is your main motivation for this extensive work?
Yeah. Thank you, Rosa. And you see, the thing is, and that's something I got to learn by time, is that today we are in a critical moment in humanity and in the existence of our planet. I worked as a young actor in different NGOs, trying to having this passion to work with the communities, trying to help poor people, help them, educate them, support them, build their capacity, help them to have a better life, basically. And then with time, I discovered that many health problems are related to pollution, are related to climate change, to heat waves. There is food insecurity. So I started discovering about the intersection between health and climate, and this is where I started engaging and getting involved in climate space a couple of years ago from a youth NGO perspective, being involved with different NGOs. And then the more you get involved, the more risks and dangers you see the climate change is causing for our population. Today, WHO is saying that climate change is the #1 disease in the world. It will be causing the most mortality, more than infectious disease, more than COVID, more than cancers. So this is real stuff. And, for me, with this mission of trying to help people, trying to improve their lives, you see that livelihoods depend on climate change, agriculture, depending on lack of water, the economic stability, health, well-being. So the development of countries now depending on climate and environmental sustainability. So what I discovered is climate change is a very big priority for all of us. And the second thing is that, the decisions that are being taken today by decision makers, either in COP, in the negotiations, or the national policies that are being made, whatever, they will have the impacts and the results after 5, 10, 20, 30 years, right? It's now the decisions, the discussions that we're having now are the ones that are going to shape our future as young generation. So when you think about it, you're like, okay, if I want to have a good future for my children, it's now the moment where me as a young person who is aware about the realities, I'm in the community working with the people in the local level, I know their challenges, and you realize that you need to be there in this decision-making space to influence the discussions, to share back the opinions, the recommendations, the needs of those local communities that you are representing. And that if you don't do that, then local communities will be left out. You as young people, your future will be at risk. So that's why it's imperative for young people to be there in the decision-making level, to be there in the community level, hearing from the community, supporting the community, and playing the role of being the voice of the community. And it's also imperative for different stakeholders to facilitate that process, to make sure young people are there in that process, bridging between local communities and decision makers. So that's the motivation, that's the process that got me involved in this, and I keep pushing now. My role is supporting, engaging young people throughout the continent, building their capacity, connecting them with partners, helping them be involved as much as they can, sharing opportunities with them, so that they can keep pushing for that mission as well, because that's the role that we need to play. And we have a privilege being aware and getting opportunities to be there in those spaces and learn about climate change and learn about the risks and learn about the realities and the needs. So it's a responsibility for us to educate our peers, share with each other, and engage them accordingly, so that we can do this together.
I have one short specifying question for you. How do you define youth or young people in your work?
Yeah, I mean, young youth is a broad definition. You, if you are motivated and engaged in your community, for me, you can be a young person. We always say that youth is the spirit. Many different definitions. Some people say youth are up to 25. From our context in the African continent, usually it's 35 and under. So anything from we have adolescents working with us, which is really interesting and important, right? When you have children or adolescents engaging with you, those people usually have the motivation, they have lived experiences, and of course your role is to equip them with experience, with capacity, supporting them. But those young youth, I call them, they are there to remind us ourselves. Like me, I'm in my late 20s, but when you have someone who is still a child speaking up and sharing their lived experiences, it reminds you that one day I'm going to be a dad, and those children who will be my children, their future is at stake. So that's a very important motivation, to have children, to have adolescents, and to have young people also in their late 20s, in their early 30s, who got their masters, PhDs, their experience, they live life, and they're able to use those skills to make an impact in the community.
Yeah. So you already touched upon the intersection between health and climate crisis. So what do you think are the biggest climate change-related health and mental health challenges that are facing young people and children, especially in African countries at the moment. And maybe if you could say a few words about how do different communities and people in quote-unquote vulnerable positions experience these effects.
Yeah, now, recently in the World Health Assembly that happened in Geneva, for the first time, member states adopted a resolution about climate change impacts on health. And basically, they mandated the assembly to have a WHO to make a way forward, a proposal on a global plan to address climate change impacts on health. So within the health community, it became a reality that climate change is one of the biggest threats to well-being, to health for humanity, and it's many ways. When you talk about food security, for example, now in the continent, we're speaking about lack of water, like agriculture being jeopardized, people losing their sources of income because of lack of food and lack of productivity. So that directly causes people to go into poverty. And then that causes them to affect their food systems. People having less nutritive food, having less access to healthy food, causes them to have hunger, to have lack of, we're talking about non-communicable diseases, we're talking about chronic diseases. For example, here, many people in Morocco and North Africa, especially women, lack vitamin D, while we do have a lot of sun. And many people talk about, how heat waves, how, the change of temperature and the change of also the weather is causing that as a disease. Here we're talking about also weather patterns changing, causing or changing the life cycle of insects that are having or that are bearing infectious diseases. So here we're talking about infectious diseases such as malaria being in longer periods, or even getting into countries that are not there. So maybe, I don't know, God forbid, in the future we can see infectious diseases such as malaria and so on in Europe, in North Africa, in countries that it didn't exist. So that's also one major reality that now infectious diseases specialists are facing, that the infection patterns are changing massively because of weather change. We're talking about the effects of disasters on well-being. When people have disasters, people are dying, people are losing houses, are losing lives. Disasters are causing also post-traumatic syndromes. So we're talking about mental health effects of disasters, and there is a lot of documentation there about people, having mental health challenges even after the disaster. We're talking about also eco-anxiety, which is a very big issue within the youth population now. The fact that knowing that your future, your stability, your well-being is at risk, and that 20, 30, 50 years from now, you're not sure how life is going to be. Especially we're talking about, for example, young people in the rural areas who are losing their, sources of income, which is agriculture. That instability, it causes anxiety, it causes stress, it causes depression, and many people are, need mental health support because of the climate change impacts on their life. So many ways that climate change is impacting the health and the well-being of the population. Especially the children and the old people. When we talk about heat waves, when we talk about the ability to cope up with extreme weather patterns. Here we're talking about vulnerable groups that are usually not able to support that, so they are at risk. So here also we're talking about the resilience of the community and the resilience of our system to respond to climate change effects. If you are having a disaster or a flooding or heat waves, then do we have a medical and a health system who is able to respond to that? If a disaster happens, could we have our healthcare system, protected and still work? So, climate effects on health is a very big one. And usually what's interesting is that when you talk about this, when you talk to policymakers, when you talk to the local populations, and you tell them how, climate change is affecting your daily life, it's affecting your health, your well-being, people tend to listen. And that's a very big argument now that we try to use about showcasing that climate change is affecting the well-being and the health. So to make a case for people to respond faster and to engage in climate action. So using the health argument is something realistic, because you talk with a farmer They don't know about COP, they don't know about climate change, they don't know about carbon credits. When you tell them that, okay, if you you respond to climate change, or if you behave differently, then you will be having your daughter or your kids or your wife having a better health, or improving their well-being, and etc. Then they start listening, because it's something that's human, it's something that's personal. So it's a very big argument, the knowing about the health risks of climate change and the health benefits of climate action is very important.
As you mentioned, listening is a big part of the climate discussion. And I will read a quote from the Ugandan climate activist Vanessa Nakate, who in 2021 has said, "We have continuously seen erasure of communities that are affected the most from rooms of decision-making, from platforms of discussion. We have seen Black people being erased, being pushed aside from these conversations. We have seen Indigenous communities pushed aside at these climate conversations. They are at the front line, but they are not at the front page." End of quote. So do you agree with this statement? And what do you think that we could do to support especially young people of color and youth in Indigenous communities in the climate change discussion? And if you have any, let's say, practical examples from your work, for example, at the COP27 or COP28, and you can share also those and your reflections on what kind of changes are needed in international structures regarding climate change discussions.
Yeah, it's a very important discussion, and I was talking about that the other day. It's about recognizing who are the most affected and vulnerable in these discussions, right? Because now, today, at those global discussions, you have the private sector trying to influence the discussions, talking about carbon credits, and climate finance, and how they can make money out of it. We're talking about governments, geopolitical, parameters influencing their decisions, and allyship, and seeing who will be a good ally, who can I work with, a lot of factors. But then when you think about the end goal, and the who's really most affected, it's usually those local communities, people in the rural areas in the mountains of Morocco, or in the Moroccan Sahara, for example, not having water to feed their cattle, and thus losing their livelihoods. People, in for example, forests of DRC that are being affected by oil companies, or that are losing the livelihoods. The trees are being lost, and they're, not able to cope up with the effects of weather change or whatever. So those local communities, those indigenous communities, they are suffering from those consequences. They are living climate change, as we keep speaking, like, for example, rich people or politicians, they come there with their flights, and then they live in hotels, and life is good in the cities. But then those indigenous people, they're the ones who live the consequences of climate change. So it's about recognizing that, and knowing that, okay, those are people who are affected. Thus, in those discussions, we need to prioritize their opinion, prioritize their need, and involve them not as beneficiaries, but as co-creators. So that's when we talk about basic development principles. It's about nothing for us without us, right? So to achieve that, to have those indigenous groups as co-creators, it's a long process. It's not something you can do in one day. It's about reaching out to them. That's number one, recognizing them, and then working with them to make them identify their need. They know what's going on. They know the challenges. They know the struggles. So it's about giving them the space to speak up, to share their concerns. And then it's about capacity development for them, in order to allow them to co-create things with someone who is in the local community, either young people or indigenous groups. They know about the problem. They know about the practical solutions that were in their context. Sorry. And then those people, if you empower them about, let's say, policy writing workshop, you give them tools about technical climate related discussions, about the global, for example, how you can be a negotiator, what's the new collective quantified goal that's being discussed on climate finance, what's the global goal on adaptation, and then you start raising their awareness. They start learning the tools and using their indigenous wisdom, combining that wisdom with those tools that you are giving to them. This will allow them to be an asset, and to come to the decision-making table, and to bring up their wisdom in a productive way, right? because unfortunately, and that's also one challenge, is that a lot of people, when you hear about young activists, when you hear about, people in the ground, a lot of people tend to, speak up, to complain, to say, no, this is wrong, this is bad. Of course, we need those complaints, we need those reality checks, but then we also need them to be combined with practical solutions, with way forward. So that's why it's important to work together with those youth groups, with those indigenous groups, empower them, build their capacity, bring them to the table, and collectively work on, shaping policy, shaping the national plans, shaping the international agenda. Now UNFCCC, they have a major group for children and youth. They have a major group for indigenous people, for NGOs, for women. So those groups supposedly should be there to voice the concerns of those groups. But then for me, it's not enough. It's about national delegations. Things should be happening in the national level. So national delegations bringing those groups and involving them in the process. For example, in Tunisia, what they did is they have a national youth negotiators group. What they did is the ministry, they brought or they selected 10 young people, they trained them throughout the year, building their capacity and involving them as negotiators in COP and in those international events on behalf of the country. So you have, friends, colleagues who are in their 20s, going there and speaking on behalf of the country on matters related to climate finance, to adaptation, to mitigation, to technology. So young people who are bringing their expertise and speaking up on behalf of the country, indigenous people who are doing the same. So that's the level that we want to reach. We want, those groups to be there in the ministry, in the government level, discussing and shaping the policy process that's going to be adopted, helping and taking part in the implementation, working together with the governments on the implementation, and also making sure they are there in the evaluation phase to ensure accountability. And, also by bringing them, you engage them in a way that they do the connecting role. So those representatives of those communities, they ensure an accountability for you as a government, as a stakeholder, and also they ensure communication and reports into those local communities, because those should be representatives of those local communities. So they play the bridge. They bring the voices of the community to the decision-making table, and they communicate the decisions that are being made to the local communities, so that this way there is synergies when it comes to those decisions, when it comes to implementation. And this way we can, have a collective approach into addressing the local needs, addressing the climate challenges. And, that's the way things should be in an optimal scenario.
So in discussions about climate change, sustainability and health, and vulnerability is often seen as a social category or something to erase. So we have also in this discussion referred to quote unquote people in vulnerable positions. But on the other hand, you have said yourself that the vulnerability in all of us came out during the COVID-19 pandemic, for example. So if we look at vulnerability as our shared human experience, rather than a social category in a way, do you think that we can also see it as a positive, as an opportunity to learn, to be in touch with our emotions, with our needs, and caring?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about climate change, it's everywhere, it's related to economy, it's related to geopolitics, it's related to stability, to well-being, to gender empowerment. When you have girls not being able to go to schools because of lack of water, to preserve their hygiene, that's gender empowerment. So climate change is related to all aspects of our lives. And then what we need at this point, and what COVID is teaching us, is to humanize those climate discussions, is the recognizing that it's us versus climate change. It's us as humanity coming together and trying to preserve our planet and taking care of ourselves and well-being. When you look at indigenous people, the way they live in harmony with nature, it's very fascinating. People recognizing and protecting and valuing nature to a certain degree, making sure nature is always taken care of. They take care of their plants, of their animals. They live in harmony. They use the resources that nature gives them in a circular way. When we talk now about circular economy and those concepts of waste management, waste reduction, the indigenous groups and communities, they have that, they rationally use the resources that they get from nature so that they don't, overuse it. So it's sustainable, and they make sure that everything is preserved. So those are the practices that we need to learn. How can we be and live in harmony with our nature? And nature teaches us to take care of ourselves. The way they have practices to take care of themselves, of well-being, of breathing exercises, being there in the nature, connecting with yourself, connecting with the nature. You learn that, when you start taking and caring about climate, when you start caring about the environment, then automatically you start caring about yourself. When you live, you go to the forest, you go to the beach, it's clean, you have clean air, then you are taking care of your health, your well-being. Then, nature is a space that gives you stability, that gives you happiness, that gives you comfort. And that's what we need to get back on, getting back to that reality. And, COVID made us realize, as you said, that, okay, and being in our homes, and how, climate change in a way caused an infectious disease that made us, get separated from nature, from outdoors, from, connecting with each other. How, we are vulnerable. Everyone is vulnerable to this climate, to simple, for example, disasters, catastrophes, anything could happen. So we are very vulnerable. And the only way for us to increase our resilience and is to stand together, support each other as humans, recognize that we need to be together, take care of our well-being, make sure, we have a support system, we are taking care of ourselves. And the only way to take care of ourselves and take care of our being is to connect with our environment, is to take care of our environment. It's like, Earth is our place. If we take care of it, it will take care of us. We don't take care of Earth, we pollute it, we cause heat to increase, we cause atmospheric change, then consequences start to show up, then flooding, then disasters, then all of those climate change consequences start to show up. So we need to get back to this harmony with the environment, taking care of ourselves, and knowing that, it has to go together. You take care of your well-being, you prioritize your well-being, you take care of environment, and this way, we can have a hope for our future generations to live, hopefully in a better way, or in a better world than the one that we have right now.
I think that's beautifully said, and brings us back to the theme of building resilience by watering our garden. And you already touched upon some ways that we can do this. To conclude, do you have any practical examples of what each of us could do, let's say today or tomorrow, in our daily life as a researcher, practitioner, as an activist, or as a human, to include these themes of health, climate change, and inclusivity in our work? And how can we care for our nature? What could be some steps for that in our everyday life?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I learned is that everyone has a role to play when it comes to environment preservation, so it's about recognizing what can I do as a human being. If you are a researcher, then what are the field of expertise that I have? If you can do something within your work, that's good. People working in the private sector, how can I make our company practices more sustainable? How can I push for discussions to make sure we are going into more sustainable ways of doing things? How can we as a group make, some dedicate some time to take care of our environment? It can be retreats, it can be ecological activities, joining NGOs, joining groups, and dedicating yourself to the cause is very important. You don't have to be a climate expert, you don't have to be an environmentalist. You can always contribute and engage through volunteering, through doing stuff within your action. If you're working in urbanism, then how can I learn and empower myself about green cities? And then if I'm working in finance, then learning more about climate finance. So every aspect, there is some intersection. For example, if you're working on gender or migration, then about looking how climate change is affecting your work, and then what can you do about it? So that's a good start. Volunteering is also a second thing, and also connecting with nature on a daily basis is very important. So learning how can I cherish what I have. If you have a city, if you have a beach, if you have a forest, a garden, if you have a natural resource, so make sure to connect with it, cherish it, and spend time there. And by doing that, protecting and connecting with our environment, we are directly taking care of ourselves, right? When you are in environments, you breathe clean air, you connect with the sound of birds, then automatically it's consider it as an investment. You're investing in your well-being, you're investing in your mental health, you're investing in something that will improve your resilience, that have your safe space. Consider environments as a safe space for you to detoxify, to connect with nature. So that's a very important practice that we can do at least once a week, in the weekend, whatever. Go to nature, take care of your mental health, of your well-being, and this way it helps you remind yourself that, okay, there is a resource that I need to protect, and I need to work together with young people, with all people, not only young people, all communities to push for it. So it depends on the level of knowledge you have, level of capacity. If you're very dedicated, you can join NGOs, you can engage in advocacy groups, you can push for policy change. If you don't have capacity, you can simply do actions once in a month or something. And it's as simple as doing sustainability practices in your home, reducing, having water filters, having, the way that you use your clothes, that you use water, that you consume food, so these simple daily actions in life, it's very important to think, thinking about how I live, thinking about what I eat, thinking about what I consume. So those realities about making my lifestyle, eco-friendly. That's something that everyone can do. It's a small change, but then it teaches you that I am responsible. It teaches you to be living in harmony with nature. It's about you having this mindset in your life. So you become an environment steward and a planet steward. And if we are able to do that, talk to our families, talk to our friends, talk to our colleagues, show good examples, and be ambassadors. This is how community change happens. So let us be environment ambassadors in our daily lives. That's my take home message.
Thank you, Saad. I want to wholeheartedly thank you for this discussion and for the work that you're doing. And I also want to thank Shazad for having us both in Atmospheric Tales today.
Yeah, thank you, Rosa, and thank you to the listeners. And it was a pleasure.
With that, I would like to thank our guest Dr. Saad Uakkas and our interviewer Dr. Rosa Rantanen for joining us on this episode of Atmospheric Tales. Thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and share.